Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today was a maintenance patch for Gw2. It did include a variety of changes to the classes, a bit of world polish, and because there was a patch, that Shaman was able to do some data mining about future upcoming patches. I wanted to run you guys through it and talk about the actual changes that were made, because there was a pretty big nerf to a significant farm I at least have been participating in recently. I actually wasn't expecting a patch to come out for a while now. We're all aware, or hopefully are aware, that Halloween, the third Halloween, how weird is that? The third Halloween for Gw2 is coming up pretty shortly. That's the majority of the data mine stuff. I'll talk about some of the other things too in just a second. And I really thought that that was going to be the next patch we'd have. But there has been some change here, including, most importantly for many of us, I would guess, the introduction of a new Black Lion skin set, the Tempest weapons. I have seen some complaints about this. This is nothing out of the ordinary, really, with what ArenaNet usually do. We have about 4 weeks of a certain Black Lion store skin, then they change the skin, bring a new one in, and the previous one goes up in price to 5 tickets. But this time, the Chaos weapons were available a lot longer than other Black Lion skins, so in theory, those are of a much lower value, especially considering they existed through the transition of key farming, where everyone was key farming their asses off before it got nerfed, and now I would guess not so many people do it. I've not really talked about this on my channel just yet, but key farming is still 100% viable, and I'm actually going to do a follow-up guide on key farming soon. So if you like the look of these Tempest weapons, which will be in the footage in the background, maybe they'll be more attainable than you think. Do remember that though key farming was nerfed in theory, at the same time, you now have much higher rates of getting scraps. It's like a 50% chance for a scrap. The actual theme of the weapons themselves, they look pretty cool. I say this about every single set. I don't know, I'm not so much about the skins, I guess. They're kind of very windy. I suppose the one thing I could point out about that is it seems very random. I mean, we have Halloween coming up. There's nothing really to do with wind with any of the patches so far. Yes, we went to the Challenger Cliffs most recently in Dry Top, but you can't really say that that's got anything to do with it. They're just a kind of a windy skin set. Makes me think that maybe they developed many of these sets a long time ago, and now this one's coming out even though it's a bit mismatched for the theme of the time. Like, you'd expect maybe a new Halloween skin set to have come out, but whatever. Anyway, so one big change that has happened to the game is something to do with GMs. Now, there was another change with the feature pack I haven't talked about yet, and I would guess doesn't affect many of us as players, but this is the way that GM messages are sent to you. GMs are a really interesting topic for this franchise because ArenaNet have typically been incredibly hands-off with the idea of even having GMs. There were GMs in GW1 as far as I'm aware, it's just that they were very rare to find. They weren't the kind of thing like in other MMOs where you can just type out in global chat, hey, can a GM please help me, and you end up getting a message. They're usually very quiet and just sort of sit around watching things or doing very specific tasks. There were never very many of them. The same is true for Gw2. Apparently there have been GMs in the game for a long time. I have never encountered one. There are screenshots of people talking to them, but there used to be a big issue in that you wouldn't necessarily 100% know if this really was a GM you were talking to or just someone pretending to be a GM. Anyway, so with this most recent patch, they do describe here in the patch notes that now the ArenaNet logo will appear when you're talking to them. Now, I have no footage of this, but I'm presuming this actually means they're in the chat box. You will know 100% if it's a GM, if it's not, it's someone pretending, and that's like a heavily bannable offense that hopefully people won't be doing. Apparently, GMs can be doing all sorts of things as well. ArenaNet are really trying to crack down on exploiting in dungeons, and a word to the wise, a GM can be in your dungeon instance, watching you in real time, and you have no idea that they're in your party necessarily, or have any idea of what you're doing. The second they see you do like an exploit while you're trying to run an Ara path, and then you sell it, you can get banned straight away. It's kind of creepy, kind of scary. But yeah, that's something that's been going on. They have a whole section in the patch notes here about world polish stuff. This is where the big one for me was listed. First of all, there was a change to the COF pre-events for taking the dungeon. This annoyed me so much. The guy you have to escort a pretty lengthy distance to actually get to the entrance of the Citadel. He had a bug where his marker wouldn't show up, where you're in range of the meta event, but you press M to see what's going on. You can't really see anything. You just have that flavor text in the top right. I'm sure I have been afflicted by this at some some point. They say I wasn't showing up, so now that bug has been fixed and it should be more apparent to people where exactly the dude is. There's not really very much more to say than that. It will still be a pain doing the pre-event, but there you go. A few other small changes were made to events, but here's the big one. Frost Scourge Sound, okay? Adjusted the event timing after failure of the Defend Coiled Watch objective. What does this mean? If you guys haven't been keeping up to date in game right now, there has been a new kind of flavor of the month farm going on. This has been known as the Coiled Watch farm. I thought it was going to get nerfed a lot quicker than I actually did. If I knew that it was going to take this long to get nerfed, I probably would have done a video on it. This farm is much like many of the other farms we've seen crop up throughout Guild Wars 2's life now, like the Ember farm, the Blinks farm that we had recently. You start an event that is a defend event. You get tons of players there. It scales up massively, thus spawning many champions, and you clear a few waves of these champions. Then the Zerg en masse moves out of the circle, like the capture point. The last few waves that are massively scaled up storm the event area, kill anyone stupid enough to stand there on their own, and then they cap it, the event fails. Because event failure in Guild Wars 2 usually means events cycle faster, they will respawn quicker, this means that then just 5 minutes later, in the case of the Coiled Watch farm, the event would begin again. You could kill a ton of champions, move out of the ring, and continue doing it ad infinitum. It's a really interesting thing about Guild Wars 2 that people are so heavily incentivized to fail events, and it's definitely something ArenaNet have showed they do not want in their game. If they designed an event to be completed, then they're gonna nerf it until that's the only thing people are incentivized to actually do. And that's not arrogance on their part necessarily. That's not them saying you have to play the game the way we designed it. It's because any of you guys who have done these farms will know just how much vitriol is spat at people in map chat. People get very angry. I've always thought it was ridiculous, but these kinds of farms become havens for trolls, and you know, in very rare situations too, you'll have players who legitimately want to do the event, not understanding why they're playing the game it was designed to be played, and everybody hates them for it, right? And you get all this incredible anger thrown around. And so ArenaNet nerfed these things. So unfortunately, if you guys didn't know about this thing existing, you've now missed it completely. It was crazy good money. I did it for about 4 hours one day, and I got 50 to 60 gold from it. Now, at the rate I clear dungeons, which takes me about 4 to 5 hours depending on the group, like we go through all of them, I usually end up with 40 to 50 gold from that. So this was actually better than playing dungeons. Much more mind-numbing, but in some ways it's better, right? If it's a mind-numbing farm, all you have to do is put on a movie or take your attention elsewhere, and then just look vaguely at the screen once every 5 minutes to cast a meteor shower or something, and boom, there you go, you get tons of loot. It was ridiculous. You would cast one thing in this tower, and anywhere between 4 and 6 champion bags would flood in at you, like within the first 30 seconds. Then you'd get a bunch more. It was a great farm for silk. You'd get tons of exotics, rares. Oh, it was brilliant, guys. Except all the hate in chat. It does bring out the worst in people, and the thing is dead. One thing I do think ArenaNet could do better with their patch notes is given a bit of explanation about these things. See, all they say in the patch notes is adjusted the event timing after failure of the Defend Coiled Watch objective. That doesn't actually mean anything to anyone, right? It means in 3 years' time, when people look back through these patch notes, there's only going to be a handful of us who remember, oh, this was because this farm existed. ArenaNet don't openly acknowledge why they're making changes, and in this case, for many of us, that's clear. But what about this change? The Infinite Watch Night tonic can no longer be used in dungeons. What? Why would they do that? It seems ridiculous. The Infinite Watch Night tonic was a really cool idea. A combat tonic. Combat tonics could, in theory, be big pillars of the economy in this game. Huge rewards, very interesting things for people to go for. But ArenaNet have nerfed the Infinite Watch Night tonic so badly. You know, what is it? An hour cooldown just for 5 minutes of use? Nobody wants to use that. And now we see in the patch notes, oh, you can't even use it in dungeons now. I think people are really overreacting when they complain about this. It's not like it was good in the first place. But clearly there's a reason. This is the point I'm trying to get at here. They wouldn't just randomly do that for kicks. There is clearly a reason why this can no longer be used in dungeons. Something to do with exploits, I'm sure. It's probably some kind of animation or skill bug kind of thing, where because it's a combat tonic and it also counts as a transform, you can be channeling an ability, you pop it and it will change something. It was something somewhere, something that could have given rise to really quick, efficient dungeon runs, but can only be done if you have this ridiculous item, okay? So they nipped it in the bud. This happens a lot of times. There is weird, quirky things that specific small dungeon groups find out that get back to the devs, and they change it. But this one was so obscure that none of us know, and people are just complaining they think that ArenaNet's completely out of touch, and I can't say that's true here. I'm sure there must be a real reason. I just wish they'd elaborate it to us. This is the transparency people are asking for, surely. Moving on from world polish changes, there were some changes to classes. Again, a bunch more skill tooltip stuff, range indicators, number of impacts for some of the Ellie skills. The only functional changes that I found, at least, were twofold. One was for Elementalist underwater. We have two AoE abilities that have durations. One is Boil, which is the Fire 2, and the other one is Murky Water, which is the Earth 5. These two abilities you used to be able to just cast on a target. As long as you had the target there, you could cast it, and it would go through walls, it would go anywhere. However, these now have LOS checks on them, so you will be line of sighted whenever you try and cast stuff like this. Kind of sucks in my opinion, but it makes sense. The other one's a bit bigger, and it will take a little bit of explaining because it's not immediately obvious what they mean, okay? This is the Necro change, and it's to do with the way Death Shroud works. In theory, it's a nerf that I don't believe I fully agree with, but it is an example of one of these things. I guess was an oversight from the devs, and they want to bring it in line. So Death Shroud works like this. You gain life force from, stuff dying, or you get it from your skills. And let's say you have a full bar of life force. You can press F1 to enter Death Shroud. You have a new health bar, and as you are damaged now, your life force takes that damage instead of your health. When you reach 0 life force, you are kicked out of Death Shroud and put back to your regular skills with 0 life force, right? Now, you could either be damaged to 0 life force to get kicked out of Death Shroud, or you could manually leave it by pressing F1 a second time. The skill Enter Death Shroud turns into Leave Death Shroud. Now, there's a small quirk with the way the cooldowns work. If you just entered Death Shroud and allowed yourself to be DPS'd all the way to 0, you wouldn't get an extra cooldown. So you'd come back to the regular world, and if you'd been in Death Shroud for more than 10 seconds, the cooldown was already up. So something could die next to you, you could use like Axe 2 or something, quickly build more life force, and instantly re-enter Death Shroud. There was no cooldown. But whenever you pressed F1 that second time to manually leave Death Shroud, it would always have that 10-second cooldown there. So this was the very small quirk, a small survivability thing that meant smarter Necros could, in theory, get back into Death Shroud a little bit quicker, okay? However, now they've standardized that. So now it doesn't matter whether you manually leave Death Shroud or whether you are DPS'd out of Death Shroud. There will always be a 10-second cooldown that starts the second you go back to your regular skills. End of question. And it is a slight nerf, but it's a functional thing. I do think it lies more in the realm of a bug fix, and if they want this to come back, maybe it should be a tradable thing, or it should be more intentional design if they really feel Necros need that extra bit of survivability. Some further changes, Black Lion related, I guess. The cap on those crafting licenses has been raised to 2 now, so now you can have one character with 4 disciplines. That's half the disciplines in the entire game. I'm curious now, because this has changed, whether the next time the Living World comes out, we'll have something like Mordry, but that costs 4 crafting disciplines all at once instead. I still feel very little incentive to ever buy these things, but there you go, they're there, they're still expanding them. They improved the node positioning on the basic harvesting pack that you can buy in the gem store. I noticed they did this at feature pack as well, actually, and it wasn't written down in the patch notes as far as I could see. In the human instance, it was really a big pain to harvest one of the trees you bought from the gem store, because it was basically spawned directly inside the crate obelisk shard, and then at the feature pack they moved it. I guess there were just more issues like this across some of the other home instances. And that's pretty much it that ArenaNet came out with and said for the patch notes. I did have a little bit of a look on Reddit at some other changes that were unlisted. I do want to mention these to you guys. Apparently, some things broke with the feature pack are now fixed, okay? So, the Salvage-O-Matic. Did you guys notice that your copper-fed Salvage-O-Matic was being really quiet recently? Yeah, apparently it was broken. His voice is now returned, so he'll throw random lines of dialogue at you that can scare you. Changes like this are so weird to me. How did that break? Like, there's some things with Guild Wars 2 that just makes me think they have this really messy spaghetti code that is scary underneath. You know, you're an innocent dev doing one small thing, and then you realize you've just destroyed some random thing elsewhere in the game. Like, how does that even happen? But yeah, so the Salvage-O-Matic's voice has now returned. Another weird thing that broke with the feature pack was one of the command line arguments for the game. And this was the idea of auto-logging in. I've mentioned these a few times on my channel. They are awesome. I'd really recommend people to check them out. There was an argument you could enact that would mean whenever you clicked just Guild Wars 2 on your desktop, it would instantly throw you in the game. You wouldn't have to type your password. You didn't have to type your login name. You wouldn't have to click login. It would just throw you straight into the game. Really cool, but it broke Now it's back, so you can once again auto log in. And apparently you couldn't double click to deposit stuff while on your bank window for a while too, and now this is also fixed. Couldn't find too much else, guys, except the fact that shaman data mined a bunch of Halloween things coming up, a few new outfits, a vampire outfit, for example, is one of them, and most interestingly, the names of several new maps, locations in the game. One of them is called the Island of Trials. One is called the Colloquy of Heroes, the Crystalline Grotto, Misty Woods, and the Wandering Isle. Does that mean that these are going to be guild halls for the game? I don't believe so. I think they're just going to be like GVG-style maps. The Island of Trials sounds like some kind of tutorial thing, in my opinion, and the Colloquy of Heroes sounds somewhat similar to the Hall of Heroes, or maybe that's just wishful thinking. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the patch for today. Thank you very much for watching. That's as much information as I could get if maybe things weren't particularly clear for you guys. Obviously, no real content came out just here. We're still holding out for the November patch, at least for Halloween. Let's hope there's something different there. I'll say that much. And I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow for another video. Have a great evening, guys. I'll catch you next time.